Hello, this is Chef Michael from Part-Time Permies. We're doing the holiday dessert collaboration with Two Family. So one of my favorite things to make that's fairly easy is a poached pear, and so we're going to show you how to do that. So I have some nice pears. These are medium size. You can kind of pick whatever pear you like, but make sure they're on the firmer side. Remember, pears ripen from the inside out. So if they're soft on the outside, they're usually too soft in the middle, and when you're going to poach or cook them, they need to be fairly firm. They can be underripe, but underripe is always better than overripe. So other ingredients we have, but we selected a deep pot that will hold our pears. So anytime you're poaching or braising, you want to balance your liquid so you don't have too much liquid, so you dilute your flavors or have to acquire too much liquid. The other thing is we'll probably reduce some of this poaching liquid into a syrup, which also means we don't want to have too much extra product. We're going to poach in red wine today. Just got a bottle of cheap Shiraz, and another bottle if we need a little more of Cabernet Sauvignon, $3 bottles. You can poach in red wine, you can poach in white wine, you can poach in juice if you don't want to use a wine product. Apple juice or grape juice, you're going to reduce your sugar a little bit on that. You can add small amounts of brandy or Kirschwasser or other things. But remember, when you're poaching, the alcohol is actually not an extremely helpful component in flavoring, and too much alcohol becomes bitter. So we're going to off balance that a little bit with sugar. We're going to reduce it down so there really is very minimal alcohol retained in here. So the reason we use a fermented item is to bring forward flavors, not so much because it's an alcoholic item. So we're going to use red wine, and again, be pretty flexible on that. Don't use cooking wine, stuff with salt in it. The box wines are okay, they're a little bit thin, they're going to need some more sugar. Go find a cheap bottle of wine that's great, don't go overboard, it won't make a big difference. Also too oaky, too dry may not be as good as actually a little more fruity wine. So things we have here are 6-7 pears. Got some vanilla. This is natural vanilla, but you could use extract. The ingredients for our poached pear, we're going to use some orange. We're going to mostly use the zest, and we'll put the remainder of the fruit in. Spices are totally up to you and optional, but it is a spiced pear, poached pear. Cinnamon is almost crucial. Highly recommend cinnamon. I like whole spices for this because the ground spices, the powders, are not as intense. They can get kind of woody from the grind, and I think the stewing and extraction of flavor from whole spices is well preferred compared to a ground spice. So I have a cinnamon stick, a couple cinnamon sticks. I've got a star anise. We've got some allspice berries. We've got a couple cloves, and we've got some black peppercorns. Any of these could be added or subtracted. Other things you can put in, sometimes people even put a pinch of salt or a chili pepper. What else? Ginger, fresh ginger is fine, or candied ginger. So if you don't like something, because I know people are sensitive to star anise and to cloves and things, if you don't like it, don't put it in there. I once tried poaching in milk, and believe it or not, milk poach is pretty nice. I would use a lower fat milk because you get a little bit of white particles on it, but surprisingly it tastes better than you would think. And so you got all kinds of ideas. Pretty simple. We're going to peel them. Some people have them and poach them half. I like to poach them whole, cut them, and then slice them after they've rested for a few hours or for a day. I usually let them cool down in the liquid, which causes them to intensify in flavor. So I like a nice thin peeler, but you can use whatever you have that doesn't take too much skin off, because this is it's fairly thin skin on a pear, so no reason to lose too much of the pear. Try and just make nice long stripes all the way from top to bottom best you can. That'll give you the best look. Not extremely important, especially if you're slicing it, but if you're going to serve a whole poached pear, the nicer the better. I'm not going to core them until later. I do like to take the end off just enough so they stand up if we're going to present them as a stand-up item. This way I can core them from the bottom if I want to and leave the stem in, or I can slice them and do whatever. One more trick for handling this. If you want to have it really smooth, because you have the little stripes from the peeler, not a big deal, but grab a Brillo pad, a new one, or the back of a rough sponge that hasn't been used, and you can use it like sandpaper on pears. Apples you can too, but pears are really the good one to do that. You just give it a light rub, and you're gonna sand out and buff out those edges that might show a little bit, and you'll get a little contrast from the red wine that may enhance those edges a little bit. Totally not necessary, but if you want to have that really nice, got a couple edges there. If you want to have that really nice show quality poached fruit. And that's it. They're going to go in here. I'm actually going to pour the wine and the spices in because pears can brown pretty easily. So by having your liquid in here, it may assist in not browning the first few, while the last couple are getting cleaned up. All right. Sugar's pretty flexible. You're going to need a reasonable amount. Again, you're balancing off the bitterness, the tannins, and the alcohol in the white wine. I'm going to start with a cup of sugar. That's probably about enough. Give it a little stir. It'll dissolve itself for the most part. It's not really a big deal, even if it's just sitting on the bottom. So I'm going to start with a cup. Again, I may put a little more wine in because I want to cover this, and I may put a touch more sugar in. Orange. A lot of ways to do it. You can use orange or lemon, or I like to peel. Again, with a thin peeler, I like these Swiss harp peelers, and almost all of your flavor is in the skin and in the pores. The little back pores contain all the oil, so I've ruptured a lot of those pores. There's a few ways to get at them, but this way is really easy. And then what I do, and I use this for a lot of techniques when I'm working with citrus, I just throw them in there because they'll be easy to strain out. They'll really get the excess of the orange oil, and the orange oil is much more concentrated in orange flavor than the fruit itself. Now the pith, the white part, is bitter, so that's why we want to avoid that a lot of times. What I'll basically do is cut it up, just like I was setting up a flavorful stock for chicken or something. I was putting onions in. I'll just cut in some quarters and just float it in there, so I don't waste it. So because poaching liquid is like a stock, it just means flavorful liquid. So it's up to you how you create it. So I'm going to put in a tablespoon or so of vanilla. Vanilla can be pretty strong. You can use quite a bit of it. That might be a little more. I'm not too worried about it. I like a good strong vanilla. Now, if you can use a whole vanilla bean, and a couple years ago there was a shortage, and they went from expensive to beyond expensive, and so I cut back on buying fresh vanilla beans, even in restaurants, for quite a while, and went to just natural, pure vanilla. But if you do have the bean, and you scrape the bean and you leave it in there, the little flecks of bean will get on the outside of the pear. You may not want them, but a lot of times it looks nice. You can see that there, and it's a nice enhancement. That's another reason, by the way, dry spices aren't the best. You'll get a little scum of stuff on it that could be your cinnamon or your allspice or such, so not so desirable for presentation. Even though the flavor is fine, if you do need to use dry spices, it's not the end of the world. I'm going to start this on low heat. We're going to bring it to a simmer, barely to a simmer. I can't give you an exact cooking time based upon the size of the pears and the ripeness. Could be anywhere from 25-30 minutes to as much as an hour or so. But I want to keep them at a very low simmer. I typically cover them or put a piece of paper, parchment paper, over the top to make sure they're submerged so I don't get a little poaching ring on it. And then I like to cool them. If they start to overcook, you got to get them out of liquid, get them in a refrigerator and cool them down. But if you catch them while they're still fairly firm, I like to cool them in the liquid, and I will leave it soak at least overnight, and it will absorb more of the wine and the red wine tannins, and will give you a really nice dark red outer pear, and it may have a creamy white center, which is a nice contrast. So I'm just going to peel out the rest of these pears, get them in there. I'll show you the setup with the cover on it. While they're many times used for dessert, they are a great garnish item for all kinds of things. Serving on salads, of course, poached pear salads, serving with cheeses, blue cheeses, cheddars, so as part of a slices and chunks of items. You can even form some chutneys if they're a little firmer. So you can go well beyond dessert and use them as part of sweet components with savory items. Even venison, think about venison or elk, and now you have all these spicy flavors in the red wine. Having a little bit of poached pear as a garnish item with it or on the plate would be pretty good. So you can be very creative with these and really explore. They will hold refrigerated for a good period of time, at least a week. My rule for removing them and throwing them out is if they start growing mold on the top, because there is sugar in the poaching liquid. If they're covered, they're all right. But if they start growing mold, they probably need to get used. Poached pears are a delicacy and found on some of the finest menus around the world. So that's why we can talk about how you can really dress this up and present with quite a bit of flair on sort of a simple item. Alright, so what I just made it, I don't know if it's going to end up in the video so much. I made a cartouche. It's basically a cover, it's a paper cover. Took some paper, pastry paper, keep folding in triangles so it gets small like a snowflake. Measure it roughly to the sides of the pot or a little bigger. Cut it in a circle so you get a rough circle, put a little hole in it for a steam vent, and then you press it down here. This is an old French style whenever you're trying to keep moisture. Keep the wine, keep humidity on a braised item, so you can do this with meat, such in the oven. It serves as a cover, or even if you have a cover on top, it's a second cover to really keep the humidity and moisture down low. So it's called a cartouche. One thing I warn you is don't cut it too big, because these little pieces, especially if you have a gas flame, will take the extra heat from the gas flame and they can catch on fire. And then as a pastry chef, or one of my chefs, maybe he's a savory chef when we were doing braises, he called them little kamikazes. Where they catch on fire and they go up in your hood or your kitchen and they float up as embers and then they burn out and they come down like little soldiers. And you get little ashes all over your nice, wonderful food. I want to barely bring it to a simmer, 185 to 210, somewhere in there is my ideal poaching. And we're going to monitor this. Get 25 minutes to maybe an hour, and as soon as it starts to yield a little bit, I'll shut it off because I don't want to overcook it. You can easily overcook pears and then you get pear sauce. Alright, so our pears are finished. Put about 35 minutes on these. They were moderately ripe. We've got the covers coming off. We're just going to look at them, and then I'm going to stick them in the refrigerator and let them cool down. So what you'll notice right now is they've softened, but not completely falling apart. They've got a nice reddish color, which will darken quite a bit as they sit overnight. And again, if they're not overcooked, I like to just chill them in the liquid, and then we can strain the liquid and either serve it with some of the liquid, sweeten it, or reduce it. Poached pears were made and then sat overnight. They can sit for a couple of days. We left them covered in the wine syrup and with the paper cover on them. And as you can see, they got quite a bit darker than if you'd pull them out right away. So they actually, as they cool down, they pull in the wine. They infuse the flavors, and then the tannins from, if you use red wine, will make a very dark pear. If you use a white wine, it won't change it so much, but you can do things like saffron and vanilla beans and things. The pears themselves, you get a variety of things you can do. This pear, I hollowed out the bottom, just used you could use a core. I like the Parisian little melon ball scoops. You can get into the core, get most of the stem out, and so it's fully edible. You can leave the main top stem on if you'd like, and then it could also be filled. So you could fill it with blue cheese for a salad. You could put a mousse or an ice cream or something in it. I would not freeze them with ice cream. I would pack it with ice cream and serve it right away. So you could do a variety of different things. So this is a whole presentation. You can split them in half, and did the same thing. I just carefully scooped out the seeds and then just feed out the rest of the stem. So you can now serve a smaller portion. If you have a big pear, you're going to get 2 to 4 portions out of a big pear. Other thing you can do if you're doing a whole pear, by the way, you can cut it on a little bit of a bias. Take a little piece off, and it'll sit up nicely. Any scrap or anything that's too soft, this could be pureed into a spiced pear puree. It could be used for all kinds of different things. On this one, I'll core it out also. And then I'll show you how you can flute it or cut it into some nice fan slices that can be useful also for putting on a salad or just serving as a dessert. All right. So you could do a couple different things. I like to slice it a little bit on an angle and not piercing all the way to the top, because that'll keep it a little more in place. Now it's not so big of a deal. It's kind of nice to have it for one person, have it mostly attached. But when you got to do 200 or 500 or 1,000 of these, it's really nice to have them all laid out and attached so that you can present it. So I've got a container here. Just gonna take a little bit of the liquid, and we could lay in a piece of cinnamon, and then you could go from there and you could create a variety of different garnishes and finishing items, be it an ice cream or a dairy component. So this is Michael, Part-Time Permies. This is our collaboration on holiday desserts. And if you want to see a little more dressed up version, we're going to have a second little snippet where we're going to use these pears and turn them into a sort of a fine dining dessert plate up for you.